Welcome back to Spooky Scary Storytime, the place where we gather in the dark, share the things we can't explain, and whisper about what might be waiting beyond the veil. And tonight's stories all have one thing in common, the Ouija board, but not the kind that you buy at the toy store, the homemade kind. The Ouija boards in tonight's stories are scribbled on notebook paper, carved into wood, with maybe a coin or a shot glass even as a planchette. They're homemade boards, but whether it's Hasbro or homemade, it doesn't matter. A Ouija board is still a Ouija board. Since the late 1800s, people have been using them to try to speak with the dead, and to their horror, often something answers back. And that's where tonight's stories begin. 5 different people, 5 different encounters, 5 reminders that the spirit world doesn't care if your board was bought or built. Once you open the door, you can't control who steps through. And these are y'all's stories that you have sent about what happens when you invite something in with nothing more than a homemade Ouija board. The first story came from someone named Aisha, and she's 42 now, but the story took place when she was 11. Her mother's name was Rose, and when Aisha was 11, her mother sadly was diagnosed with colon cancer. They were also very short on money, so not knowing what to do, they ended up moving in with Rose's friend Lola. And it was a full house situation. Lola had a few kids that were teenagers and early 20s. They had rooms of their own. They had significant others living with them. And so Aisha ended up sleeping on the pull-out couch many nights with one of Lola's daughters. Being that there were so many people in the house and nobody really had a lot of money, everybody was working, they had to find fun ways to entertain themselves. And one night, Aisha's mom, Rose, and Lola decided to make a homemade Ouija board using a planchette from another game as the planchette for this homemade board. Aisha was curious, so she was peeping around while they were playing with it, but they didn't seem to be getting much at first. And then came the claim that they were in communication with a little boy who said he lived in the house. They closed the board, said goodbye, didn't think too much of it. I think both the adults thought that the other one was playing tricks on them, but eventually they brought out the homemade board to play with it again, and that's when things started getting creepy. The planchette was flying all over, saying all kinds of things, and that's when Rose says, "This is fake. There's no way this is true." So Lola says, "Why don't you ask it something privately in your head and see if it answers?" And so she says, "Okay, it's worth a shot," and she does. She doesn't say her question out loud. She just asks it something in her head, and then the planchette starts to spell out 2.5 years. She pushes the board away and says, "BS." When Lola pressed her to tell her what she had asked, she admitted that she had asked how long she would live. Years later, the family would realize that she was right because she died approximately 2.5 years later. But the story gets worse. That night, Rose, who is weak from her medication, drifts to sleep sitting up, and her hands are twitching as if she's using the board while she's asleep. But Lola was superstitious and she said, "Oh, don't wake her, don't wake her." But when Rose finally woke up, she was crying and everyone said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And she said that she had had a dream, that she was visiting her boyfriend who was incarcerated at the time, and they were separated by a panel of glass. The panel of glass disappeared and they found themselves in an all-white room with a table in the middle, and on the table sat a Ouija board. Across the room stood a very desirable, handsome man. And at this point, Aisha said that in their culture, when the devil comes to a woman, he comes as a desirable man. So Rose, in her dream state, knew that this was the devil. And he said, "Come with me, Rose. You won't suffer anymore. You won't have cancer anymore. You'll be pain-free. Come with me." And she said, "No, I don't think so." And her boyfriend said, "No, Rosemary, you're staying with me." To which the man said, "Why don't you use the Ouija board to decide? Why don't you use the Ouija board, play with the Ouija board more and decide if you want to come with me or if you want to stay with him?" As Rose told everybody this story, she was crying. And that night things got worse even more. Around 3 in the morning, Aisha was woken up along with Lola's daughter, who she shared the pull-out couch with, and they heard country music playing from the washroom. And so they go in there and they see that the clock is flashing 12 o'clock and country music is playing through a static radio. And so they turn it off and they go back to bed. They think about checking on Rose, but think that because she's sharing a room with another one of Lola's daughters, she's probably fine. But in the morning when she wakes up, she has deep red scratches across her neck. Apparently in the middle of the night, Lola's daughter, who Rose shared the room with, had woken up to hearing her say, "No, leave me alone," as her nightgown seemed to thrash from invisible hands. This apparently freaked her out enough to say, "Rose, we need to take you to a church." Rose responded in a voice that was not hers, "I'm not going to no effing church." Needless to say, the next day they did in fact take her to a church, and she broke down to her knees when she came face to face with the crucifix. She was sweating and crying, repeatedly dipping her hands and face in holy water. At one point, she drenched her entire head in holy water. And she said as she did it, she felt like something was being sucked out of her stomach, like a palpable dark presence was being pulled out of her as she was dousing herself in holy water. When they finally left, she was still crying. They asked her why, and she said that as she did it, she heard heard a man's voice tell her that she had lived a hard life, but she was forgiven for everything she did. And when her time came, she would be loved and at peace and forgiven. Luckily, the dark presence that she experienced didn't seem to bother her anymore. But a month before she died, Aisha said she was asleep next to her hospital bed when her mom looked at her and said, "Aisha, don't move." After a moment, she asked Aisha to turn on the light, and she told her that she saw an angel above her head. The angel looked at Aisha, and then it rose and said, "Let go. It's okay. She'll be okay. You can let go now." Aisha said her mother passed away 6 months before her 14th birthday, exactly 2.5 years from her diagnosis, as the original Ouija board said. And she says, even now our family experiences strange things. My daughter sees things, but we try to attribute it to light instead of darkness. She said her niece, when she was younger, used to claim that she could talk to Rose. She ended her email by saying, maybe we're a family with gifts we're too afraid to use, or maybe we are a family that's haunted. But I know one thing for sure. My mother was possessed the night we used that Ouija board. I don't know, y'all. That story was one of the creepier ones I've ever read about Ouija boards. I think it gave me chills when I initially read this email. This next story comes from someone named Ava, and she says she grew up sensitive to things that people can't see. When she was growing up, her parents were incarcerated, and so she spent much of her early life living with her grandparents, who were very, very conservative, very religious, and they lived in one of the oldest houses in town. Before they had moved in, the house had been gutted down to 2x4s and rebuilt entirely. She said, I was about 3 years old when I first moved in, and that's when the experiences began. Ava said she remembers waking up one night to see red eyes glowing against the wall, and soon after that, when she was about 4, she crept out of her room to crawl into her grandparents' bed. But as she passed the dining room, she saw them, 2 little girls who looked exactly like her, wearing the same dress her mother wore in the family photo on the wall. One had braided pigtails and the other high pigtails. They ran and laughed down the hallway, jumping on the door frames, staring at her the whole time. Her brother later admitted that he saw them too. Not long after that, she opened her bedroom door in the middle of the night and looked across to the kitchen. There, crouched at the fridge, was something that she can only describe as crab-like and spider-like. She said it was holding a milk jug and drinking from it, and when it noticed her watching, she slammed her door and ran back to bed. Ava said strange things always just seemed to follow her, and a lot of times when she was growing up, her older cousin babysat her. But once her older cousin told her that one night when she was watching her and Ava had already gone to sleep, she watched 3 of her My Little Pony toys get up and start walking across the floor on their own. She said she was constantly talking to people that weren't there, looking and listening to things that weren't there. And she had a particular fixation with the dryer, always telling her that something was inside it. She said, looking back, I believe that was true. I do remember something being in the dryer. And Ava said as she entered adolescence, for a long time, things were quiet. She didn't have too much activity going on. It seemed like something that she had only experienced when she was little, until later on when she moved into her dad's house. She said the very first day upon moving in, while hanging curtains in her room, she saw him. It was a man-shaped silhouette that stood on the sidewalk staring at her through the window. He had short curly hair, no shirt, and the outline of shorts. He didn't move, he didn't blink. And across the street was a church, and further down the road was a hospital, but the street itself was empty. She was absolutely terrified, and she jumped from the chair that she was standing on while hanging curtains and ran to tell her dad. Her dad then went outside, but no one was there. And from the corner lot, you can nearly see the whole street. She said, I didn't believe him, so I checked myself, but I couldn't see anything. And unfortunately for her, that was just the beginning. She said she was foolishly playing one day with a makeshift Ouija board with her younger brother, and things escalated. His bedroom door began opening at exactly 10 p.m. every single night after that, whether he was in the room or not. From across the hall, she'd open her door and watch it slowly creak open on its own. It was like clockwork. They knew it was going to happen night after night after night. And then came the sleep paralysis. She said shadows loomed over her and there was a crushing weight on her chest. It was the sensation of being held down and not being able to move at all. That happened for nearly a year. And then came the entity. She said one night she dreamed she was sitting up in bed, and at the foot of her bed was a chair angled slightly toward her beside her closet door. But when she woke up, in that chair sat something that had no face. It just had long black hair, a red shirt, and blue jeans. She said she was talking to it. She can't really remember the words she was saying, but then it stretched out its arms and pulled her toward it. She said she woke up screaming. Her body was dragged through her comforter and sheets, and her feet were dangling off the bed facing the chair. Later, after showing some of her stories in a TikTok video, obviously after she had grown up, she said she had another dream. Someone came to her in the dream and spoke about that entity, and they said, depending on how much energy you give it, that's how big it'll be in your life. It can be as small as 13 inches or as big as a toddler or as tall as the largest human known to man. And she said, what is it? And they said, you already know what it is. The only way to make it go away is to give it no energy. She said to this day, no one in her family has ever seen what she's seen, but She believes that this entity has followed her from childhood to adulthood and she doesn't know how to make it stop. That's why she shared her story. So if you have any words for her, let her know. I'll be sending her the link to this video once it's done so she can read all the comments and any advice you have for her. Before I get into this next story, I want to issue a little bit of a warning. Some people are very uncomfortable with the name that I'm going to be saying in this story for storytelling's sake. It is the name of a supposed demon, and that demon is spelled Zozo. So if you're not comfortable with this, you might want to skip to the next story. I will put that timestamp right here so you can skip over this one if it makes you feel uncomfortable. So there's your warning. Even among Ouija board enthusiasts, I feel like it's helpful to give you some guidelines if you are playing with Ouija boards. I don't play with them. This is just from what I know. Set boundaries, and if Zozo comes through, it is not a friendly spirit. It'll seem friendly at first, but it's not a friendly spirit. This is Trina's story. I'm going to read you exactly what Trina said because I don't want to get any details wrong. When I was about 14 or 15, I fell in with a group of friends who were a few years older than me. We were all into the paranormal things, but one girl, Amanda, was much edgier, drawn to darker stuff than the rest of us. Another friend, Morgan, often told us stories about her family's paranormal experiences. Her dad practiced black magic in Mexico, so I tended to believe her when she talked about strange things. Amanda had an old Ouija board that she'd picked up at a garage sale. None of us had ever used one, so we decided the first time we all hung out, she'd bring it. But when the night came, she forgot it. We didn't want to lose the chance, so we made one out of a pizza box. It was late, around 11 p.m., and we were at Morgan's aunt's old house. The electricity had been shut off, so the only light came from our phone flashlights and a couple of Bath & Body Works candles. The board didn't work, so instead we tried a seance. We even offered a piece of pizza, like that would help. Amanda and Morgan went to the bathroom and then out to wait in the car while the rest of us chanted and waited. Nothing happened, so we decided to leave. But as we walked downstairs, I glanced at the bathroom and froze. A girl was crouched in the corner of the bathroom. I thought Amanda and Morgan were messing with us until I saw headlights outside. The girl's car was running. We ran to the car in a panic. Amanda and Morgan were screaming, saying that they had heard a phone ringing in the back seat, playing that old ringtone none of us even had in 2014. They also swore that they heard a man's voice. Later, Morgan's aunt told us her daughter's friend, a medium, said a little girl had died in a fire in that house, starting in the bathroom. The next morning, when we went back, every mirror and a few candles we'd left behind were broken. The house was locked up tight. That should have scared us off, but it didn't. The following weekend, we met again, this time at Morgan's aunt's boyfriend's house. He told us he had lost a baby to SIDS in the upstairs bedroom, though he claimed the house wasn't haunted. We waited until after midnight, lit the candles, and used the real Ouija board. The first question we asked is anyone here? The planchette slid to yes. We asked, will you answer some questions? Yes. What's your name? Zozo. We asked again. Zozo. We all knew that name. We panicked, broke the rules, and even took our hands off the board. But when we put them back on and said goodbye, things only got worse. That night, we heard running upstairs. We were the only ones awake. After that, every time we went back, there were noises, children laughing, doors slamming, footsteps pounding overhead. Once, Morgan's cousin had her hair yanked so hard while climbing the stairs that she was pulled backward a couple steps. We all saw it happen. The haunting followed us for months. At Morgan's house one night, we even started using a quarter as a makeshift pendulum. We asked it yes or no questions and finally dared it. Can you give us a sign in the bedroom? We gave it 10 minutes. By the 8th minute, the PlayStation turned on by itself. The TV, too, which was an older flat screen that couldn't just turn on without someone manually pushing the button. Morgan's little brother eventually got rid of that quarter by tossing it in some random kid's locker at school. As for the Ouija board itself, Amanda got scared and gave it to Morgan. Later, Morgan's mom, deeply religious, found it, threw it out, and thought that was the end of it. But a few days later, she stormed into Morgan's room demanding to know who had dug it out of the dumpster. She found it wedged between the back door and the storm door. No one admitted to touching it. She drenched it in holy water and burned it. That might have been the end of it for them, but not for me. Strange things started happening at home. Lights flickered, doors rattled. I heard running up and down the stairs at night when everyone else was asleep. My doorknob shook violently as if someone was trying to get in. And then there were the scratches, always in groups of 3. They were so deep that other people noticed them and I couldn't have made them myself. I always had acrylic nails. That activity followed me for years and only stopped when I was around 17 or 18. Now I'm 26 and I haven't had another experience. Honestly, I'm grateful. I'd like to think I'm no longer open to it, but I'll never forget the things that started the night we made the Ouija board out of the pizza box. That story actually gave me the chills when I read it. I scared myself. I was like looking behind me in the house. That's not the first time I've gotten a story about Zozo the demon either. I actually will link in this video in the description a short clip about Zozo the demon coming through AI. So if you're interested in that, go watch that video next. This next story is sad. It came from someone named Dolly. Dolly said, I grew up in El Monte, California. Back when I was 12 years old, my sister Wendy brought home a homemade Ouija board. I'm 38 now and I still remember that night. We started asking it the usual questions. What's your name? How long have you been here? And it responded to all of us except my sister Karina. For some reason, it didn't like her. I don't remember the name it gave us, but I'll never forget what it told my brother Joe. It said to meet him in Los Angeles on the corner of some streets I can't remember now. It was on a specific date not far off. It said Joe would know him because he'd be disguised as a woman with red hair, red lipstick, and a red dress. And then it said this: if you don't show up, I'll take you when you're 33. Joe didn't go. And we kept asking it questions until my older brother walked in and said he was going to tell our dad. As soon as he shut the door, the planchette started moving on its own, spelling out, fix him. As in, go fix him up, beat him, hurt him. That's when my dad came in furious and told us to burn it, and so we did. But afterward, things only got worse. Some nights, I'd wake up with this awful feeling that someone was watching me. I shared a room with my sisters Wendy and Michelle and my brother Joe. One night, I opened my eyes and saw a dark figure shaped like a man standing in the room. Then the bed sank at my feet like someone sat down right there. I shook Wendy awake and told her there was someone in the room. She went to turn on the light, but the switch didn't work. Joe woke up, checked the bulb, and found it had been unscrewed just enough so it wouldn't turn on. We woke up our parents, and when they searched the house, they found the kitchen window wide open with muddy footprints leading inside. For weeks after that, we'd find more footprints in the backyard. Years passed and we tried to forget, but when Joe was older, he moved to Tijuana. One night the phone rang. He'd been murdered. He was 33 years old. I haven't touched a Ouija board since I was 12, and after what happened to Joe, I never will. This last story was sent with the subject line called The Sound of Silence. I really like the way that this person, Jordan, wrote out this email, so I'm going to read you exactly what they said as well. I grew up in a suburb 25 miles south of Cleveland, Ohio, with not much to do for fun. So like a lot of teens in the 2010s, my friends and I liked to explore abandoned buildings in the surrounding areas. We would find them, which was half the battle, venture in, look around, take pictures, and just admire the many eerie things left behind from the history's past. My personal favorite was an abandoned meat factory that was also a nursing home at one point, and a construction sign-making place. It was an interesting combo. But the place we frequented most was an abandoned elementary school about 20 minutes outside our hometown. It was called Richfield Elementary, and it was a particularly good spot because of how pushed back off the road it was. We would park at the church across the street, run through an open field around to look, climb in through a big-ass hole in the gate, and then through an actual hole in the wall leading to the gym. The gym had a stage with bleachers, a rope hanging from the ceiling that only the bravest would swing from, several pianos, chairs, desks, tables, etc. It seemed to be the area that a lot of the classroom objects were stored before being abandoned. We found it super creepy because all of the dark space and corners and old pianos we would try to play just added to the unsettling ambiance of the school. We knew this place was definitely haunted as we have heard faint noises down the halls and the sound of rolling chairs sliding across the floor on the second floor above us. Some of our friends claimed they saw shadows before. There was asbestos backstage, so we typically passed through the gym quickly. We knew this place very well back in high school. Fast forward to a few years, and one of my high school friends and I are sophomores at a local liberal arts college. It was a small, sleepy school, not much ever going on, 20 minutes away from our college. So we made a plan to get our high school group back together, bring the guys, and show them how neat Richfield is. And also, maybe we make a Ouija board, and maybe we bring said Ouija board to the school. I know, don't F around with Ouija boards. I used to do it a lot back then, but I swear this was the last time I ever used one after what happened to us. So we assembled. 9 of us piled in 2 cars and met up at Richfield around 10 p.m. We brought some drinks, flashlights, and of course, the homemade Ouija board and a plastic shot glass to use as the planchette. Then she said #college. Walking through that school again after so many years was nostalgic. It was exactly how we left it. Funny thing about abandoned places, what makes them awesome is that very few others know about them, nor would we be dumb enough to go into one. We walked through the gym, the staff lounge, the front offices, the cafeteria, and decided to set up shop in what looked to be the library on the second floor. The library was a mostly empty room with shelves that perimetered the walls and books thrown about everywhere. My guess was that some teens had definitely been there to be destructive without consequence, something we never cared to do. We pushed a few tables together and laid out some lighting around the board to begin calling on spirits of the school, if there were any. We had a lot of skeptics in the group, mainly my boyfriend, now husband, she says. But I was hoping maybe something cool or impressive would happen. We just started dating at the time. So there we are, 9 friends sharing stories and laughing, engulfed in the complete darkness other than the light coming directly from us. Silence in the room, but you could very clearly hear the distinct background noise of crickets chirping in the field outside, as the windows of the school were smashed and boarded up. This is important. We whip out the Ouija board, join hands, say a quick prayer of blessing and protection. Then we welcomed any and all spirits of light into the room. What happened next, I can honestly say, is still the most terrifying and real experience any of us have ever had and any of us will ever have. 3 or 4 of us lay 2 fingers on the cup and ask if anybody would like to speak to us. Someone said yes. We speak with Billy, a student at the school. It isn't before long that we ask what everyone else wants to see when doing a Ouija board, proof that it's all real. I asked, Billy, can you prove to us you're here? Billy said, yes. I asked, Billy, what will you do to show us you're really here? Billy, D-E-A-F. Billy, yes. As we say each letter, most of us thought he would say dead or death. We look up together as the last letter F is touched, then shoots over to the yes option. Right at that moment, the crickets stopped chirping for about 3 seconds. Instead, the sound of white noise hit my ears, like the ringing in your eardrum when you've been standing next to a speaker all night at a concert. I look at my friends' confused faces as they reach for their ears. The crickets come back. We were dumbfounded. Despite 2 of my friends being ready to get out of there, we tried again. It was the first time I have really had something like this happen to me, let alone the entire group of people I was with. I asked, Billy, did you just do that? Billy spelled out, yes. I asked, Billy, will you do it again, but for longer so we know it was really you? Billy says, yes. We sat in complete silence and stillness. This time, as he circled around the yes option, the sound of the crickets faded away, like someone was turning the volume of the world down. The white noise came back louder, and this time lasted much longer than the initial 3 seconds. I looked at my friend and saw her mouth, what the F? Except she wasn't mouthing it. She had said it out loud, but none of us could hear her. Some of us say it was 10 seconds long. Others say it was more like 25 or 30 seconds. I do know that it was long enough for all of us to truly believe that someone was messing with our hearing to the point where I did not think the sound of the crickets would ever return, or any sound at all for that matter. It did, though, finally, and we quickly said goodbye and flipped the board over. My scared friends were now shook to the core and were ready to leave. Literally, one girl was clutching a rosary with tears in her eyes. The journey to walking out was much more intense and unsettling than it was ever before. It felt like we opened up some sort of doorway that perhaps, or definitely, should have remained closed. As I walked with light ahead of me and nothing but black darkness behind me, I became aware of just how unnerving all of this was. We then ran out of the gym, back to the safety of our cars. The school was demolished years ago. It was an unsafe place, and I can only assume that word caught on about how easy it was to access. I sometimes want to think that I made this all up in my head, and it wasn't truly how it happened, but it happened to all 9 of us, and each of us can still recall that day like it was yesterday. My skeptical husband still talks about how that was the freakiest thing he's ever experienced, and honestly, same. They say that your eyes can play tricks on you, but never did I think your ears could play just as dirty tricks. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate you being here more than you know. If you're new here, the series is called Spooky Scary Storytime, where I share true readers' tales, the ones that seem too unbelievable for anyone else to believe. We believe you here. If you want to send a story, please visit dogoodstaybad.com. That's my website. We also have Spooky Scary Storytime merch, like a cute coffee mug that says my show is on, because that's my favorite comment that y'all leave. But really, if you want to share a story, it doesn't matter if it's supernatural or if it's just unexplainable or weird. We like all kinds of stories here. Please feel free to send it. It may take me a little bit of time to get back to you, but I promise I do read through these emails. I am working actively to make more YouTube videos so I can get more of these stories into a single episode. I appreciate you guys so much. I love you. Stay spooky. I will see you next time.